Hi everybody, I hope you're doing well. This is our next lesson on typography, and I think this will be our last formal lesson. We will be having a quiz at the end of this week. Exactly how that's going to work, I'm not sure. I still have to figure out the logistics of that. I think it'll be Socrative. I think I will set a time, and as many people can log in at that time and do the quiz. Uh, that's my hope. I don't know how it's going to go. We'll have to see. Anyways, let's get on with the lesson. So this is going to be about, as you probably figured out, the history of typography and a little bit about fonts. Um, in my last lesson, I talked a little bit about a couple of fonts that I do not like and that generally are not liked within the design community. And those are Comic Sans and Papyrus, and there are a couple other fonts that are not overly popular. But I do want to talk about a couple that are, and a little bit of history of typography, just so that you know what you're looking at. You can get a sense of what good type looks like. So let's just go way back in time to when we first started having typography or typefaces, what are now called fonts. So a long time ago, books were only made by people who could write them. They were scribes, right? And so they would write out everything that, like every book had to be handwritten by someone. That is obviously time consuming and expensive. Typically, monks were the type of people who would do this sort of work. Um, as you can imagine, there were not a lot of books available. All of this changed with a guy named Johannes Gutenberg. He created the first what was called movable type, and he did it with this. Okay, he created something called a black letter typeset. Okay, and so the first book that was ever written or um, printed using this technique that he created was it was based on a black letter type, and you can see it here. It was the Gutenberg Bible, but it is very difficult to read. So it's based on Roman characters, but it's very difficult to make out the letters. You might be able to make them out, but you gotta work through them. And so uh, this was new and amazing that this was a thing, but certainly it was not very usable. Now, at the same time, in China, there were other scripts being done. There were because Chinese, and this is in China and in Korea, because their written script is hand scripted typically. This was being mechanized as well in China much earlier than it was in the West. But we're going to be looking mainly at what happened in the West because that's what sort of most um, influences typography as we know it. Okay, so because we were using the Roman um, alphabet, okay, which is this, which you recognize, we needed letters that could be used for these letter forms, right? And that's what this was originally. Just it was not readable, okay, and that we get that from here, okay. So we needed something that was readable based on our letter set. Okay, so the first people to do this were really artists or artisans, and they created um, a letter set that was meant to be more readable. There are sort of 4 or 5 examples, and I'm going to show you some of the examples. So Jensen was the first Roman, it's called the Old Style Roman font, and it was like the first one to be designed. Baskerville was very similar. Okay, you'll notice that this is a serif, okay, serif font, and this is a serif as well. Caslon was another very similar serif, and then Dido is similar but much more designed. And we're going to take a quick look at some of the differences here. So I've just kind of put down an example. This is using the Caslon typeface, okay? And then what you'll see here is we've got Baskerville, okay? And I've got Dido. I don't have the other typefaces on my machine, so I can't make one of these for each of them. But you can see there are some differences. Some of the differences are in the main differences, to be honest, are in the treatment of the serifs. So if you look at sort of the L here, how big this serif is, this is based on hand scripting. Baskerville gets a little bit more kind of a smaller serif treatment if you look at the L there. And then Dido, look at the way that serif is treated here. So it's much different. Well, much different. It's different in terms of, you know, what was happening at the time. Okay, and so we'll take a look down here. These are just some larger examples of some of the differences. You can see the difference in the serif. This looks a lot more handwritten, I suppose, just in terms of that treatment. This is a bit more, I guess mechanical, but not really. Still very scripty in terms of its sort of influence. And then you can see again this very straight-edged typeface. Okay. There are a few others that are important, but and we'll look at some names of those as well. Actually, I did set out some examples. Avenir, Din, Futura, Gilsans, Bodani, Rockwell. These are all important fonts. I have others that I like as well. I think probably my favorite is Helvetica New. It is very versatile, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. There are like hundreds of versions of Helvetica with different weights, and some designers love this typeface. Some designers can't stand it. I think because it's everywhere. Some people really don't like it. Anyways, these are some good choices if you're ever looking for typefaces to work with. They're classic and usually pretty safe. And they also have various weights that would give you some variety within your typeface. So if I wanted to take Avenir there, I don't have all of them, but there are a lot of different treatments of each of these fonts, and they're all professionally designed classic fonts. Okay. All right. So moving on. These were, as I say, the first typefaces that showed up. And this all happened, I'm not sure if you saw the dates there, but over here you'll see this is all happening 1722, 1750, 1799. Okay, so quite a while ago. All right, that was sort of how type was for a long time. Not much changed for a while. The fact that there was movable type meant that there were some technologies that were developed. One thing was called the linotype, another was called the monotype. These were basically ways in which printing presses could be a bit more efficient or a bit quicker in terms of creating printed words or printed manuscripts or books or whatever it was that they were printing. But nothing much changed in terms of type until around the 1950s, where advertising started to show up in newspapers, and there was an increased demand for attention. There were more typefaces that were out there, that here, somewhere here. So as newspapers started to want to draw your attention, typefaces started to take on an important role in that. And then things like brand identity started to become important because, you know, look at this Kellogg's typeface and McDonald's typeface. This is the 1960s, all right? And so trying to get people's attention and get people to recognize brands, these typefaces were used in that manner, and they were also used to start to try and draw your attention. So that was a big change, and this started to create a lot of new fonts, lots of experimentation, a lot of really bad fonts. But then there was also a move away from these kind of busy fonts to some more simplistic fonts. One of the sort of classics I mentioned over here in Illustrator, Futura. So Futura was a minimalist. A lot of these are quite minimalist. This is a modern minimalist font, and it's based on geometric shapes. So if you look at some of the other letter forms in this type, so they've got these apexes, these points, right? All of them have got these pointy triangular shapes, or the O and the C, even the D. These are very round, very geometrical, okay? Compared to, if I take a look here at Gilson's, this is actually called a humanist, and this is similar in some ways, but you'll see, right, these are, again, similar, but what you'll notice in some of the characters is there is a little bit more of a variance, right? Variance in the font, just in the widths of things. And that's meant to look a little bit more hand-drawn. And that's why it's called humanist, as if a human did it versus a machine had created that. Okay? Anyways. So we have new fonts coming out. We have kind of a bunch of varieties. And you've maybe heard some terms applied to things like architecture. Things like designers tend to break up time into these periods, and the periods are stylistic, right? And so I'm sure seen some of these names like Gothic and Renaissance, neoclassical. You've probably heard of Art Nouveau is one that's quite commonly referred to. Art Deco, right? So these are terms, and design followed this, architecture followed these sorts of terms, and typography was no different. Typography followed, so you can find fonts that were Art Deco fonts, and they were used in a specific time. And there are, Art Nouveau, and there are Gothic fonts, and they all had like a time period that they were very common. These are still used today, so it's not that we don't use these anymore, but a lot of them have a strong period tied to them. For example, Art Deco, this has a very strong style, and it stylistically matches. You might see movie posters like The Great Gatsby, which was set in, if I can get The Great Gatsby book cover, or maybe just the cover. The movie cover. Okay, so this is a very classically classic example of that style, right? Art Deco. Okay, and so this is an Art Deco font, this sort of design that we're seeing here. Very good example of that. Okay, so where were we? We were here talking about the fact that type followed these styles. That's about it for this element. I do want to mention that typesetting was originally done with blocks, letter blocks like this. And I do want to show you quickly a little bit of a film that I think is interesting. And I'll just start it up. So here we'll see a guy, he is a typesetter, and he basically takes these metal blocks or wooden blocks, and he would have a set of letters for every typeface that he has. And you can see there he's got all the letters for this particular typeface. And he would assemble them and get them ready for print, and he would make his titles and put everything together like, as you're seeing here. Block it all out, tie it up with a string, and then move it over to a printing press. And this is the technique that before computers had to be done every time someone did a typesetting. This movie is called Helvetica. You don't have to watch it. You can look it up on Vimeo if you were interested. There's a trailer you can watch. It's about 2 minutes long, which you don't really need to watch much more than that if you were interested, because it does get a bit long-winded. But this is the way things used to be. And this guy's like an artisan, right? He's a professional typesetter. There you have it. If you can't pick them out, I'll help you with some of the fonts. So this is Helvetica. This is about Helvetica, so they're showing you a bunch of the Helvetica font. Okay, Q, that's Helvetica. That's Helvetica. Again.
Type is saying things to us all the time. Typefaces express a mood, an atmosphere. They give words a certain coloring.
This goes on. That's it for now. I'm coming to the end of my 15 minutes of my screen recording, so I'll stop it there and wish you guys well. And let me know in the comments if you need anything. All right, take it easy, guys. Bye.